Hey guys, today I'm going to teach you everything you need to know about sharpening a knife. It's a very basic function in a kitchen, and it's something that people overlook on a regular basis, especially when you're at home, you're on the rush, you're using your knife, you don't think about the sharpness of it. Why is it so important? Well, a sharp knife is going to give you a clean cut on anything from something like a tomato to a piece of meat. And a dull knife is going to saw away at items. You're not going to cut through. Things aren't going to be clean. And if you know anything about cutting with a knife, if you have a dull knife, it actually bruises products on a cellular level. So that's why your herbs turn brown if you're cutting them with a dull knife. That's why your meat kind of gets beat up and dulled. So today, very basic skill, knife sharpening. Why we do it, how we do it. For starters, let's get an example of a knife that's not sharp, that's not intended for cutting through a piece of produce. We have this lovely tomato here. This obviously is a household knife. If you look closely, this doesn't want to cut through. I'm putting pressure. It's kind of going through a little bit, but it really doesn't want to go through. So this would be a type of knife you wouldn't want to use because it's going to press the juices out of the ingredient. The tomato is going to lose all of its flavor. It's going to be sogged out on the plate. Basic equipment in sharpening your knife. You need your knife that needs to be touched up, given a little bit of love. You always want to take care of your knives and make sure they're getting the maintenance that they need. And then the whetstone. You ask yourselves, what's a whetstone? Well, a whetstone is something they've been using for sharpening knives for hundreds of years. Usually you can find them at a restaurant supply store. They have different grains you're going to hear. Coarseness is another term you might hear. There's 500, there's 1,000, there's 2,000, there's 5,000. If you look closely, this is a double-sided stone, and you can notice that line running through the center. This side right here is the coarser side, and then this side right here is a little bit finer. You're going to start with your coarsest grain and work your way up to the finer. And some chefs like to have 5 or 6 lined up, and they'll go through the process and really touch up their knife and get it super, super razor sharp. The sharper the knife, the more careful you're going to have to be on your daily prep and knife usage. But a sharper knife's better for everybody. It's going to give you a better end result in any kind of culinary activity that you're partaking in that involves a knife. You want to soak your stone for about 10 to 15 minutes before you start getting into sharpening. This has been sitting in here for a while. Any vessel will work, just room temperature water works great. The reason you have it soaking is every time you use it, you're leaving deposits from your blade, and you want to get rid of them. And if you can see, it's kind of coming off on my hands a little bit, because as you're sharpening your knife, you're actually taking material off the blade. When you're honing, you're touching up the blade, you're adding straightness to the blade. When you're sharpening, you're actually physically removing material from the blade. So you're going to be causing a friction and a reaction, and you want the stone to be wet to help keep it as clean as possible. You never want to rub this to clean it with a towel. It'll leave deposits from a towel. So you never want to touch this up with anything. There's also oil that people use on stones as well. Usually a honing oil can be used on a whetstone. I like to soak my stones in water, but as you can see, every time you run your finger along it, you're bringing off material. So as you're having that reaction with the blade on the stone, you're going to be depositing material, and you want to have it soaking to make sure that it's clean and ready for the next knife. You've had your stone soaking, you're ready to sharpen your knife. You're going to want to put it somewhere, because it does have moisture on it. You're going to want to put it somewhere so it's not going to slide. Now, I said you don't want to wipe it with a towel, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with putting it on a towel to keep it stable. You always want to be in control of the situation. You don't want to be moving around. You don't want this moving around. Remember, we're working with a knife. It's sharp. Even when it's dull, it's still going to injure you. And a dull cut is actually significantly more painful and worse than a sharp knife cutting you. So keep in mind, we always want to be in control of the product. In this case, it's the stone. So I like to have it nice and stable. You can even keep the water close by and kind of hit it on there and make sure there's no particles from the last time someone was using it. There's 2 ways to sharpen a knife. It's all about comfort. Some people will bring the blade towards them. Some people will go with the blade away from them. I prefer anything with a knife away. Once you commit to the direction you're going to go and the way you're comfortable with sharpening the knife, you want to do that every single time. So 2 weeks from now, if I want to sharpen my same knife again, you want to go in the same direction. If you press away from you once and then towards you, you're going in different directions, and it's going to cause uneven sharpness in your blade and an inconsistent blade. If this is a new technique for you and you're using a stone for the first time, you definitely want to go a little higher on the blade. Keep your fingers away from the actual blade. I like to go a little bit higher up if I'm not comfortable with what I'm doing. And push. And push. Okay, I've got a little bit more experience, so I go a little bit closer. And I'll even do it in sections. The angle you want to have is almost like you're trying to shave a layer off the stone. I'll usually go about 10 to 15 times on a side, and then you want to switch over. Because you have to make sure that you're doing the same motion in the same direction with the knife on both sides. You don't want to just do one side, then you're still going to have a dull knife. It's important that you, using the same technique, press the knife in the same direction, like so. And please, go slow, your comfort. You know, maybe you're more comfortable going this way, heel to tip, heel to tip. So you've done your first side. You've done about 10 or 15 on the side of the knife. You're pressing. Then don't forget you got to do the other side. So we'll switch over, and in the same motion, you're running your knife like you're trying to peel a layer off of the stone. All right. So we'll check the blade. It's starting to get nice and sharp. A little dangerous. You know, sometimes you might find that one spot's a little duller than another. Maybe you like to use your knife a lot near the tip for certain cutting techniques. Maybe you use the heel a lot. Depending on what your uses of your knife are, you can also go just on that specific part of the knife. Applying pressure, applying pressure, applying pressure. Go at your speed, comfort level. It's starting to get sharper. I can feel that the blade has significantly changed in the degree of sharpness. Maybe a little bit more here. You're pressing, pressing, pressing. It's getting sharper. So we've started on the coarse. Now that we've finished sharpening the knife on the coarse grain, we're going to briefly place our stone back in the water, let it soak for a few minutes. Once it's been soaked, we have our finer grain. And if you go to a restaurant supply store, you can find individual stones. You can find stones that need honing oil. You can line up a few and you can work your way down the line. In this case, it's 2 grains on 1 stone. And now that we've got that nice sharp blade, we're going to go back and touch it up with the finer grain. Away from you, I suggest, is the best technique. You're pushing away, you're pushing away. We've done one side, we're going to switch back to the next side. Go at your own level of comfort. If you're not comfortable running the entire blade down the stone in one pass, you can just do a section of your knife, pressing, pressing, work into the center of the knife, pressing. You're just trying to shave a very thin layer off the stone to get it sharp, and it's getting much sharper. When it comes to sharpening a knife, you can use this technique pretty much on anything with a straight blade. You would never really want to do this with a serrated knife because you're going to take all the serrated teeth off the knife. You can do it with a paring knife. Instead of going out and buying a $5 paring knife every couple of months when you've worn out the blade, you can use your stone to sharpen your paring knife, your slicing knife, your French knife, your boning knife, the scimitars, anything. If you're not comfortable with this technique away, there are other alternatives like a sharpener. I tend to enjoy doing this a lot better because you have control over the blade. If you're using an electric sharpener, it's no guarantee it's going to give you the best blade possible. This is the old school technique that chefs do on a daily basis to make sure their knives are as sharp as possible, and they can only blame themselves when the knife isn't in the right shape that it needs to be. Watch what you're doing. Don't be staring at the TV. Don't be yelling at the kids. This is something you want to take extremely serious. You can cut yourself. This particular knife needs a lot of love. One of my cooks dropped it on the tip a few months ago, and it's still got some jaggedness to it that needs to be worked out. So this is great for if you do have a ding in a knife, it can be taken out in this process as you're shaving off. It's going to take some significant time to work out the imperfection in the blade, but this is a technique that chefs use to ensure the sharpness of the blade and the quality of the edge. So we've sharpened our knife, and a great way to test it is to go back to an ingredient that requires a sharp knife. I showed you earlier a dull knife on a tomato. If you look at it now, we have this tomato and right through. So let's check and see how sharp this knife really is. Pretty sharp. Almost made it all the way through. Definitely my first time trying to cut a piece of paper with a sharp knife, but that looks pretty good to me. So that's how you sharpen a knife, folks. You need your knife, you need your stones. You can pick up a Whetstone at any restaurant supply store. You can use water, honing oil, depending on the instructions of the particular material of the stone. There's clay, coarse to finer. Please move slow at your comfort, preferably away from you. Never bring the blade towards yourself. And once you've done both sides, test it and make sure it cuts through something, like a tomato or a piece of paper. And that guys, that's how you sharpen your knife.